Okay. Yes. Now we put up the now let's pressure. Let's try. You give your email. Do you have the
Yes. Yeah.
You want the slides or you want the video? Which one you want first?
That's the slides.
Yeah, the slides.
Yes.
This one
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Social media.
To the start, yeah. Yeah. This slides.
Yes.
Your box. So now we can do session. So this one screen share. Okay. Okay, so we can start. You would like me to record, right?
Yes, please.
Should work.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for your patience. Hello and welcome to our first Ask Me Anything session of 2022. My name is Caitlin Curtis, and I'm from the UQ School of Business and the Center for Policy Futures, and I'll be moderating our discussion. And again, apologies for starting a bit late. I would like to begin, though, by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which we meet today, the Yagara and Turrbal people. And I would also like to pay my respects to their elders, past and present, who continue their cultural and spiritual connections to country. I recognize their valuable contributions to Australian and global society, and their cultures are among the oldest living cultures in human history. Today's topic is what we can predict from social media with artificial intelligence, and this is your opportunity to ask any of your burning questions that you hopefully already sent in, from the technical side to some of the social and ethical aspects. And hopefully we're going to have an action-packed discussion with our panel, who I'll introduce in just a moment. The Ask Me Anything series is brought to you by the UQ AI Collaboratory, and you can learn more about the UQ AI Collaboratory at this web link. And the idea of these events really is to raise awareness about some of the great AI research that's happening here at UQ, and really start some multidisciplinary discussions and connections and collaborations, and really bring people in to have inclusive research here around AI at UQ. I will be continuing these Ask Me Anything sessions, hopefully a bit more smoothly throughout the year, about once a month. So if you have any ideas of topics that you'd like to talk about, please feel free to get in touch. We would really love to hear from you so that we can design these sessions to answer the questions that you'd like to ask. So before I introduce the panel, just a little bit of housekeeping. The way that this will work, this will be roughly a 60-minute session. We'll run it just a little bit over. Those of you who are joining in person, we'll have pizza and we can socialize and chat a bit after. So we'll start off the session with your questions that were pre-submitted, and then in the final 20 minutes, I'll open it up to questions in the room and on Zoom. So if you've got a question, feel free to drop that into the chat or the Q&A box. So to get started now, I'd like to introduce the panel. So first, I'm very pleased to introduce on my right, Professor Xue Li. Very fortunate to have Xue here. He's a distinguished world-class expert in artificial intelligence, particularly in the field of social computing research. He's a professor here at the UQ School of Information Technology and Electrical Engineering. He and his team have recently created a new software system called Opinion Search Engine that he may speak to a bit as we go along. This program searches opinions from communities across social networks using big data techniques. Over the past 15 years, Xue has published over 160 research papers, and he's also been named as one of the 50 most powerful people in Australia by the Australian Financial Review for his work on big data. So welcome, Xue. And on my left, it's my absolute pleasure to introduce Associate Professor Nicholas Carah from the UQ School of Communication and Arts, where he is also the Deputy Head of School. His research examines algorithms and advertising on digital media platforms, and at least some of his work has a focus on digital alcohol marketing. He's the author of several books, including Media and Society, Power Platforms and Participation, which came out last year. He's involved in many research projects around alcohol-related harms and nightlife culture, and also researching the potential to use digital media to help foster change around drinking culture. And he's part of the ARC Center of Excellence for Automated Decision-Making in Society, which is doing really amazing work, and a director of the Foundation for Alcohol Research and Education. So welcome to you both. Thank you so much for your patience working through our technical issues, and I'm really looking forward to this discussion. So we might start off quickly with a very short 90-second video just to kind of set the stage around what we're talking about with AI and social media. And hopefully this will just give us a bit of a jumping off point so we can launch into these questions. But given that we're a little behind, if that doesn't work, we can just jump into the questions. Yeah, that's all right. Why don't we just jump right into the.
Oh, when you share the screen, you need to share the sound as well. When you click on the share screen, but there is a sharing on the bottom left. Yeah, share the sound.
Behind the scenes. It knows what you like and what you comment on, what brand. It's human nature. We surround ourselves with people we agree with, and the internet has only made it easier. For many, Twitter is a place to have existing views reinforced. Often without realizing it, a lot of us choose to live in an echo chamber, a place where it can seem like everyone on Earth is just like us. And Facebook? Well, Facebook takes it even further. Of course, you can hide those posts from your goofy aunt, but Facebook actually does a lot of that work for you, behind the scenes. It knows what you like and what you comment on, what brands you follow, what ads grab your attention, events you're attending, and publications you read. Facebook uses all that data to feed its algorithms, and those algorithms choose what you see. And if you know where to look, you can actually see what Facebook thinks you like. Your interests, your hobbies, and even your political views. The result is what's become known as the filter bubble, where your timeline is filled with opinions you share. Facebook actually makes money off knowing those things. They sell you and your filtered bubble to advertisers. Those advertisers will pay more to get their products in front of people that are likely to buy them. And if you're seeing things you like, you'll spend more time on Facebook, seeing more ads, and making the company more money. But does the bubble keep us well informed? It's a tough question to answer, especially while the technology is still changing so fast. But one thing's for sure, that technology has the power to make us more connected or more isolated than ever.
So these ideas of echo chambers and filter bubbles, I think, are things that many of us have heard of. And I wanted to open up with the first question, maybe to Nick. I just wondered if you might be able to tell us, is this how this sort of really works, or what are some of the latest thoughts around this coming from social science, around filter bubbles, echo chambers, and the things we just saw?
Sure. The whole idea of the filter bubble, kind of emerges over a decade ago in the late 90s with people like Eli Paris, a very sort of famous viral TED talk about the filter bubble in their book. But even some work by people like Matthew Hyman about the link structure of the internet, and an argument that in the US there was like a democratic internet and a republican internet. And I think in the decade or more that's followed, there's been a lot of popular discussion, like it's become one of those popular theories that everyone talks about the filter bubble. But a lot of social scientists have gone out trying to find it, and you can't find it. So to kind of try to prove the theory empirically, as I guess you would say, proving to be very difficult. And part of that is really when you go and look at people's social media feeds, so you go and look at their Google search results. Google search results don't really differ that much when it comes to things like news among different users. And our Facebook feeds, just as any of us would know, are full of views that we disagree with. Like there's nothing about my Facebook feed where I think it's kind of affirming just my own world. And there are like many complicated reasons for that, I think, at least with social media feeds. They're not so much organized around the idea of serving us ideas we already agree with. They're organized around the idea of serving us content that keeps us on the platform longer. And one of the things about us is that content that aggravates us kind of keeps us on the platform. So there's this, there's something much more complicated going on than just the production of this kind of homogeneous bubble that we live in. And I think that that's sort of where social science has kind of ended up in the last few years.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I'm taking this more and more just to be.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
My next question is for Xue. I wonder if you might be able to tell us a little bit more about this opinion search engine, and I'll relay that to a question we got from Russell. How can we use AI to predict things from social media?
Okay. So-called opinion search engine, firstly, we look at social media or social network in three different levels. The highest level is about keywords, topics, issues like Ukrainian and Russian invasion, all of these issues currently people care about. And that is a content level. And in the middle level, it is, we call it the social network. That means a friend of friend, followers, VIPs, opinion leaders. They are the people's connectivities. In the lowest layer is geographic area. That is country, area, university, all company locations. So in these three layers, we look at a model have 5 variables. Where, that's a location. Who, that is people. And about which issue or which object, about a hospital, about a political event, and also at what time, because timing is also important. And the lastly is that opinion itself. So opinion search engine means we keep searching for those 5 variables and prepare a big table. And that big table is who, about when and where, this about what issue expressed what opinions. And then we use that to understand the landscape of the whole social media for health issue, for political prediction of elections, and also for some kind of performance-related company performance, for example. And if everybody say sell, 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 or buy, and then that company's performance will be affected by those VIPs on the network, because we have so many followers. If that VIP say buy this, and probably everybody wants to buy that. So this is amplified opinion, and then we needed to be aware of this artificially amplified opinions, and we use algorithms to detect it. And also we needed to find out that there's rumors, for example, defame some people and put some fake facts in there. And all of those issues, and also there are cyberbullying issues, attacking people, and the young high school student committed suicide because his friend put some photos or something like that. So this is a new challenge to research community, as well as to everyone involved within the social media and the social network. According to the Pew survey, I think it's more than 85 people now is on the social media, almost everybody.
85%.
85% of people are on the social media. Even there are 60% people over 80 years old. They are still on the social media. Even older people, as young as 5 or as old as 80 plus, they all on social media. And this cannot be ignored. And some kind of rumors or bad fake news spread on the social media and caused a lot of international crisis. Yeah, we need to be very careful how are we going to deal with this, because the whole world is changing by this.
Yeah. I might just follow up on that, and this is to you, Nick, with a follow-up. We have a follow-up question that's related from James. I wonder if you might talk about what kinds of things we can predict from social media. And I'm also thinking of maybe some of your work with Instagram and photos, of really thinking broadly about social media.
Right, yeah, I think that, like from me, from a media studies point of view, what makes social media businesses interesting businesses is that they, like if we think about television, for example, it's my kind of way of trying to answer this question, if television made a profit and then invested the profit in making content, and the content attracted audiences, and that was the business model, and they sold the audiences to advertisers. And social media is still in the business of selling audiences to advertisers, but they don't do it by investing in content. They take the profit and they don't buy content at all. What they invest in is this kind of AI architecture. And what they're thinking about is, how can we use AI algorithmic models to kind of sort and create ever more fine-grained audiences. And so what that creates is this kind of decade of trying to kind of bit by bit, or even maybe much faster than bit by bit, kind of expand the range of data. And for me, like the range of aspects of cultural life that get converted into data. And so it starts out with things that are easier to digitize, like text. So or like connections in a social network. So for Facebook, it's early newsfeed algorithms running on things like which friends have interacted with this piece of content. So metadata about who's a friend and what are they interacting with. And this is kind of easy to digitize because it's behavior on the platform. And then it goes down to things like sentiment analysis of text. Again, text is easier to digitize and build natural language processing models around. And then the frontiers that start to emerge are things like the images, like the content of our images next to the content of our videos. And that's partly about social media platforms in terms of what we do on them, is we produce way less text than we did a decade ago and way more images. Like very few of us are typing stuff, we're taking photos and sharing them. But also you get this kind of advances in computer science that enable much more powerful neural networks, much more powerful forms of image recognition and classification. And so we need to kind of think about these deeper and deeper aspects of our culture that get kind of built into the recommendation engines of these platforms, not just what I say, but what I take images of, or what's in those images, and even maybe the composition of the images, how much natural light they have in them, all of these kind of very textured things that are going in our culture that get built into the prediction model.
The prediction is one of the issues. For example, in memory rights, if we look at the social media the data, people have a search on a specific keyword in a certain time period, and mention some locations, and mention some we call the sensitive words related to the laws or violence.
Yeah.
And then that quantity is searched, and also they are actually, we can figure out the locations because according to the IP address, according to the mentioning of the keywords and the checkout from the Google Map. And then we can see there is something going on.
So using,
Yeah.
collating all that information and predicting an event or
Yeah.
at a location at a time.
Yeah. One of my PhD students, he did his PhD is on location-based prediction social event.
And so we've got another question from John. How accurate is social media prediction? I don't know which one wants to start first.
I say sometimes very badly predicted. Sometimes it's very accurately predicted. I give one example, and that was the Queensland election we did a few years ago. And we predict that even the fraction correct, the number of elected ratio of the voting. There are some big issues. That is, you cannot just predict something out of nothing. So we need to check out the historical data. Actually, it's not just out of your counting of the tweets, counting of the positive words and the negative words. It's not like that at all. Yeah. In one of my talk, there was a parliament member actually, Queensland government. He challenged me. He said, "How do you predict what I'm thinking?" I said, "In 10 seconds." And he said, "I'm not going to say anything about my political preference. And I'm not going to tell you the positive words or I love or hate or something like that, sentimental words." I said, "Don't worry. Answer my one question." I said, "Stop the vote. Yes or no?" He said, "Yes." And I know which party you are talking about. You are going to vote because a lot of words on the internet is not positive or negative associated with the sentimental word. It's a political opinion. Yeah. And then if you simply count on them, it's not easy. Like Trump. He is politically incorrectly said something against a woman, against some issues. So a lot of people say nothing, but they are the followers of the Trump. So if we not just look at what they say, and look at their followers, and Trump's followers are many, many more than Hillary Clinton. So that means some people we call them silent majority, probably didn't say anything yet.
Yeah.
So we look at the whole model.
Yeah. Many of the likes.
I think predictions sometimes I'm like, I wonder if it's prediction at all that's going, like a lot of what we call prediction. I just wonder if that's actually what's even going on at all. Like sometimes I think just quite predictable pathways being built out. Like, do you know, when I log on to Facebook and I see an ad and it's got a particular, it's an ad for a bottle of beer or a brand of beer that I drink, and Facebook knows I drink it because I ordered it from this online store last week, and now they're putting it in my feed. These are not so a lot of the predictions are they're not very elaborate at all. Like they're really blunt and predictable. But for me, from a media studies point of view, I think that the interesting thing to try and think about is this kind of interesting feedback loop going on between us and our sense of what we want and what we're interested in, and the prediction model itself. So it's not like we're here living our life and the model of the platform is making predictions about the content we're interested in, the ads we're interested in. And that just kind of lines up with who we really are or who we're not. But it's like, it makes predictions about us. And then those predictions, whether they're right or wrong, kind of shape what we're interested in anyway. And so there's this kind of very malleable relationship where we become the people the platform predicts we are. Prediction kind of constructs us, rather than accurately predicts us, if you like. So I think I'm kind of very, I think it's important for us to be alive or aware of that very dynamic relationship between our actual really existing opinions and interests and identities, and this, these predictive systems that we now live our lives kind of with.
Can I add in a little bit more?
Yes.
One of my another research student did a prediction work on the suicide ideation. And because that's the system, actually, I get, I'm in the social group of cyber ideation of suicide and the therapy group. And some of them are actually very accurately predicted because somebody wants to live broadcasting his suicide. And then everybody is trying to dissuade her just to stop work and they should keep broadcasting. And then the team just follow her location and save them. Yeah, there are some cases. Yeah, if you're watching some people, we call the suicide ideation is this person got a problem already. And you watch in real time. This worker, my PhD, my research student did a publication, did a writing papers, but also there are some groups in China. I was one of the members. Actually, did some help. And it's a cross multinational group. The leader is Dr. Huang in Amsterdam. That group is 500 people watching all the research.
But like this is really complicated too. Like if we think about these really harmful and problematic forms of content, so and I think we have to be careful about the way I think we talk about them. But if we think about the example of say pro-eating disorder content, huge problem with social media platforms. In terms of them trying to think about what their responsibilities are, and at least one of the things that you could say appears to be happening is that users who the platform predicts have an interest in that kind of harmful content. It's kind of platform is predisposed to serving them more of that content. Even in cases where, say, in their private chats, they're saying, "I wish TikTok wouldn't serve me more eating disorder content." Well, the platform picks that up as an interest and responds to it. And so here you have this kind of the prediction of the interest in it reinforces the interest. And so then, you get this kind of affinity logic where, well, if this person is interested in this kind of pro-eating disorder content, then maybe other people like them are interested in it too. And so, here the platform is not merely predicting some vulnerability the audience has, it's kind of actively making the audience vulnerable here. And so I think we really need to kind of be aware that this kind of prediction is not this kind of straightforward linear. It's a very social kind of dynamic thing that's now going on between us and how we feel and who we are and the algorithmic logic of platforms.
That's all really interesting. Thank you. And that's a perfect segue to the next question, which comes from Nin. Really relating to all this, and the question is, how will this impact the way that corporations behave? So I think having these kind of tools, I think that just around having these kind of predictive tools with social media and AI.
I remember I got UQ Vice Chancellor's strategic funding for that. And during the interview, we asked me a question. So, Xue, why are you asking for money? I said, there was more than 6,000 people on the UQ campus and talking about life on the UQ campus. And also there are some events happening in the UQ and talking about Facebook or social media or Twitter, whatever. And do you like to know the summary of their opinions? Right? It's all interesting. What are you going to do with this money? And I said, there are people talking about the Melbourne University, talking about the UQ, talking about other issues, and the international student talking about which Australian university is the one I should choose, which degree I should do, all of those things. So if you can watch the social media and the people's opinion, and then it's important to know your next performance or predicting the student number, whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah. So social media is definitely a place to look at about people's opinion.
Yeah, I think there's a real kind of tension here between the kind of possibilities or opportunities for corporations to use social media to understand the public, to understand their audiences, to build markets, all of those kinds of commercial and political opportunities that emerge on these platforms. But you know, like I kind of think that there's this kind of interesting kind of historical reoccurrence happening here where the 2020s look a lot like the 1920s. So in the 1920s, we had radio and then television emerge and dramatically reshape the way information is circulated in society, the way these institutions play a role in our societies. And you know, over a 20 or 30 year period, there's this enormous response from governments in the West, particularly about, well, the role of the state, what role will the state play in regulating these institutions? And it feels like we're in a similar moment now with digital platforms that they've had a decade that's been an absolute Wild West decade where they've been able to do just the craziest things. And now there's this kind of moment that started to emerge over the last 5 years where you have governments say, and the public say, whoa, wait a second. The collection of data at this scale, the use of it to predict, the acting on these predictions, is power. You know, it gives whoever's using those platforms an enormous amount of power. With that comes responsibility. With that comes potential for harm. And so, you know, for me, in a lot of my work, I'm thinking about advertisers. Like, there's an argument for corporations being able to build markets, find their audiences, and so on. But you know, if you're selling alcohol or financial products or gambling or you know products that the public has an interest in regulating because they can cause harm, then we need to understand as a public what's happening here and what the limits ought to be and what accountability looks like. And so I think this is where we now find ourselves, you know, over the next decade or so, trying to figure this out.
I can give another example about the second-hand car, about this mobile phone usage. Another PhD student who graduated already is analyze people's opinion about the mobile phone. So if we talk about a specific brand and also its battery, its API, and then talk about those things, and then we can have a structured analysis. If you don't like a specific mobile phone, we can find out why you don't like it, because the comments our battery life is too short. It's kind of like some API does something nasty. And then we can have a landscape for all the mobile phone available over the market. Similar to the second-hand car, all of those things. Sometimes we found out that those social opinion is very different from the typical website which sells second-hand cars or something. Our opinion is possibly opposite. So you believe which one? So sometimes we can have a little bit more objective view or give people a different opinions. And then that give sometimes it's really, people didn't even know how could you get that. Like in Brisbane, people are swearing on the 11 o'clock on Tuesday morning. We found out that, but we cannot explain it. Some people say, oh, probably it's a tea break time, and Tuesday is the most relaxed time by Monday or something like that.
So there's a peak in swearing on Tuesday mornings.
Yeah, every morning has the more swearing than the afternoon. And also we found out the urban people at 3 o'clock in the afternoon in the CBD area, because that time they walk the dogs or yeah. And the sleeping time in Sydney is 11:30. In Brisbane it's 10. And then in Toowoomba, I think it's 9:30. We found out many this kind of issues. We call the language model, the geographically related language model, like a UQ. In UQ language model, one of the words is called Xue Li because I'm a professor in UQ. And in the UQ's language model, you have that specific word. If you search my name, probably appear in UQ, and that's why we analyze social media in terms of the language model for each organization, for each individual social media user. for each object as well. So it's big data analysis. Don't worry about the storage. Get everything.
Thank you. That just makes me think of another question that we got. So I'll just do a couple of more of these pre-submitted questions, and then we can have a bit of time for some live questions. But it does make me think here, a question that we got from Matt, is the loss of privacy due to social media a good thing?
The privacy protection.
Or just this,
Yeah.
this way that we
You
can
take out
learn and make predictions from social media around groups of people or potentially individuals. This, where's the balance maybe, or how does everyone feel about the boundaries of privacy?
I say a little bit more probably you operate at different levels.
Jump in?
Sure,
us,
sure. I mean,
Yeah.
the simple answer, I think, is no. But privacy to me often gets us on the terrain of thinking about individual choices. So, why should I be concerned about my privacy? Well, it's my personal information. What do I want to be able to do about it? Well, I want to be able to choose who has my personal information. But if we think about why the loss of privacy, and I think what we're practically talking about there is the kind of availability of personal information to third parties, social media platforms, and so on. The why we should be concerned about that is not because of any individual. It's hard to find individual reasons to be concerned about that. But it's more important for me, I think, to think about the larger social consequences of it. What does it mean to live in a society where these private corporations have these enormous amounts of data about us? And then what does that do to us? And part of that for me is not just about like a dystopian sort of surveillance society. It's not just about those kind of questions, or the slightly kind of paranoid, I suppose, or conspiratorial type direction. But to think about a society where, what happens is corporations or politicians or governments start to think less in the frame of narrative. So less in the frame of, well, we need to build a society where people think together, imagine themselves collectively, share values or whatever. They start to think in the logic of prediction, like we can predict what people want, and therefore we don't need to bother anymore with constructing larger cultural narratives in which we live. And then what do you get out of that? Well, you get a much more polarized society. And then we sit there and go, why are we so polarized? So I think that in a way, why I think we should be concerned about, well, why I would say the loss of our privacy is a bad thing. It's because of all the things that follow on from that create the particular kind of historical environment or social environment that we now find ourselves in.
Can I do a little more?
Yes.
I think the privacy protection on social media currently, in my personal opinion, is terrible. The law system is behind the technology. There are a lot of intrusive stories about the system recommended something to individuals because this person is searched for some sensitive words. And a lot of this kind of story. I think the problem is the government making legislations or whatever is behind the technology is developing. And sometimes you don't like that kind of intrusive behavior from a certain platform, but you can do nothing. Nobody can do anything. I personally have reviewed some stories. So what we can do, I think it's not simply we refrain ourselves like iPhones called personal control of the privacy. Means I want to use your private information. If you disagree, then you don't have a service. Another one we call it called the differential privacy. That means we do statistics with or without this any individuals, and our statistical information, summary information will be definitely correct at cost. But that kind of privacy is never enough. I hate to say that. That is why I don't like to post too much on social media. And we are still having this kind of risk. And even some bad things happen to the young people. I think that we should really improve this kind of this aspect.
I have there seems to be quite a bit of interest around this, so I'll just ask these before we open it up. A couple of related questions. One from Kesh. Maybe I'll start that one with you, Xue. How can we improve fake news or detect trolls?
I have another PhD student, he's not here. He graduated already on rumor detection. So if you talk about fake news, then people challenge you, how do you know that in the first time? Where is the ground truth, for example? So fake news is because of it is a fake. That means later we find it out. But once this come out, it's very difficult. And then there are some news on the Ukrainian, both sides from Russia and the Ukrainian. And how do you know which one you should say? And then now, currently people tend to believe the big companies, CNN or ABC or whatever. However, we can do some research on this as well. For example, if you tell me there is an earthquake in CBD in Brisbane now, who believe you? And people immediately look at the patterns of this news, how this news is spread. And in the first 10 seconds, in first 20 minutes, how many people retweeted? And if the people retweeted, where are they from? Everybody in CBD retweeting this news. And suddenly there is a surge of the quantity of this news. And that could be real, right? Otherwise, some people may tweet opposite news. Say, I'm in the CBD. I didn't say that. What do you mean? And then immediately is a fake news. You know that. So behavior or transmitting patterns, spread patterns of this fake news could be predicted or verified by using AI technology. We are doing that, but not good enough.
I don't know if you want to add to that, Nick, or do you want to wait for this related question?
I'll go for it.
From Stan. How can we tell what is real versus bots, and especially mentioning disinformation campaigns?
Yeah, it's tricky to think about what like what is fake news, misinformation, disinformation. In some respects, it's not new. Before this current moment, we would have called it like propaganda, or we would have called it public relations or advertising, or So I think that there are two things I'm going to think about here. One is that the fake news is a kind of problem that's endemic to the design of platforms that are engineered for attention. They're engineered for attention because they sell advertising. Unless they're somehow designed differently, you're always going to have a problem like this. And detecting it and finding it is like treating the symptom rather than the cause. And then I think related to that, that it's not a matter of whether you can predict or identify bots or trolls or fake news and somehow weed it out of the platform. But it's like, how can you design a platform so that it doesn't, engender and promote this kind of content? And, like if you're thinking about quite local forms of news and discussion, like you're less likely to get that kind of content on, say, small neighborhood groups where people sort of know each other and can verify it against their reality in the neighborhood, than you are in like larger, more, disconnected networks of people who don't really have a real world reference point for things. And so that's kind of, it's more about the design of the architecture of the platforms and the forms of sociality it produces, rather than us kind of trying to run around and try to identify the bad content. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. Then you wonder, are we sort of stuck with these three architectures that we have now?
Well, I don't think we should think that we are. And I think we should think that the challenge is not that's the stakes in a sense, the design of the platforms themselves, rather than our ability to kind of run around cleaning them.
Just noticing the time, and we'll keep going since we started a bit late, but I will check and see if there are any questions from the audience that we'd like to ask. And if not, we'll keep going with the pre-submitted questions, but I will just give you a chance, otherwise we'll keep going.
I have a
Yes.
question, if it's okay. Actually, I have a comment first and then a question. My comment is to me, I felt when you addressed the question around the security and privacy that you focused mainly on the provider of the platform. But I think there are also third parties that can access information, the information that is on social media, and use it in some form of violation of privacy, right? Whether that's government, and we think at it in a silly way. We say oh, conspiracy theory about government accessing these, but in some other countries instead that's occurring, right? If you look at what's happening in Russia, for example, but also other parties that are not government, but they are private corporations or hacking groups and so on. They are trying to get your information. For example, if you post where you are, you went on a holiday and so on, I know that your house is empty, right? So I could exploit some advantage there, right? But okay, aside from this comment, I get a question around what you guys believe are the main challenges that AI has to overcome in the space of social media analytics and prediction. And I would like Xue to answer from a technical perspective and Nick to answer from a more ethical perspective. What you think the challenges are for AI?
I think for me, the major challenge for me is how to do things by using AI technology over social media. Do a lot of things, but sometimes technologies do negative impact to the society. I think because of the social media and the young teenager suicide rate is going up. And a lot of young people, first time hopping to the social media, using their real identity, and didn't have, unfortunately, don't have a supervision from their parents. And that kind of situation, I remember when I started doing the cyberbullying detection over social media, and one of the PhD students, he graduated already, was my daughter was using social media. And I said, what are you doing? And she said, Daddy, what are you doing? I'm on the social media. And suddenly I was scared because last year she was 9 years old. And then I said, oh, she doesn't want me to watch over her on social media. So the technology take my daughter away. I hate that. Then I said, okay, what I can do? Just at that time, there was a PhD student come to me and she got a scholarship. And I said, how about we do cyberbullying detection over social media? I want to using this technology to do something better for those naive young children. And she was the first time graduated with cyberbullying detection PhD thesis, and the citation got a huge number of citations after that. And then we got an LC grant for doing that. But this is too little, too small. And currently, a lot of people using the social media, but their privacy data is holding on by the company, by the platform. Why not we do a little bit more? We take back our personal data on my own security key, manage the data without my permission. No company, no other one can use my private data. As long as I'm using the social media, and then we have some kind of instant temporary agreement, you can hold in your using my data. And if I don't like you, I go another social media platform. Why not? Yeah. And this is not even happened yet. And the dominated companies providing social media services, they withhold our data. We can do nothing. Government doesn't have a regulation to force them. You see, technology is difficult. to get good things done. That's what I feel bad at the moment. We cannot just purely talk about art. Sometimes it's dangerous, it's damaging.
Yeah, the ethical challenges are not technical. They're social. They're not to me about making algorithms fairer or less biased or any of that. The ethical challenges are a question of what are we doing with these technologies in our societies and what kind of societies are we trying to build? And I think for me, from a cultural point of view, there's a real question about where do you go next and what does it mean? For example, I think we're in a moment where we're overwhelmingly focused on recommendation and prediction because that's what the models do. But with the emergence of new kinds of models, like in the last few years, experiments around GANs, generative models, that in the case of me thinking about culture, can synthesize voice, can synthesize images, and it's very difficult for humans to detect if they're real or not, or synthesized. Then there are real kind of social questions about what it means to live in a culture where you can no longer really figure out, you know, what is a representation of reality and what's synthetic. Now, there's no technical way to make that kind of algorithmic system more ethical. It's entirely at the level of the social about, well, what would you use systems like this to do? And should we even use them in whatever ways we intend to use them? So I think that's what the stakes are becoming for me. And sort of where I think the difficult discussions are.
Excellent. Do we have other questions from the room? Yes.
We all know that users' opinions will always change, and there are tons of new tweets like every day on the Twitter. So how do we make prediction like dynamically? Yeah, and we are talking about the advantages and the good points. So what's the current limitation about AI model on the social media? Yeah.
Maybe I can talk about something.
Sure. So just to repeat for the audience on Zoom, so sort of the current limitations of making these predictions with these dynamic systems.
Yeah, think about why people stick with social media. What's the point? They rush the screen all the time in the middle of the night or this kind of thing. So the social media become a kind of necessity now. People sharing the information, share the opinions, and find out the friends, deal with the loneliness, and also get the news. Almost everything now you can go through social media to buy something on the new network and to buy the book or people recommend you. So it is a lifestyle already. So how can we do that? We need to really have a good model for that. That model, people say, are you going to identify individuals in the world? No, we don't say that. We identify individuals in terms of your IP address, for example, or your login name is a funny furniture name or something like that. But we understand you. We know your needs and do the positive things for you. Every individual social media user will have what we call the language model. Even though you're talking about the same thing, you are different from everyone else, like your DNA. We can prove that. So so-called language model is every word you have said in one dimension, and every word you have said in another dimension, and the cross point is the TF-IDF, or we say the frequency. You are using those two words together in one time. So by using that unique language model, we understand you. We try to do the recommendation and the promotion and those things. I got a very bad experience on the social media recommendations because I'm using my laptop at home to search for some news, some videos, and political news, and also some movie I like to watch, Snipers, for example. But when I come to office, when I start using my office time, I needed to search for AI for big data for my teaching. And that machine doesn't remember that. And in my office, recommend some Chinese news to me. I don't like that. So that kind of challenge AI for personalized recommendation, and don't let me laugh at it or hate it. And also do the good for society. I think that is a very big challenge. For the AI technology, that is we call the probability graph model, Bayesian network. And the Bayesian network means you figure out the causality. The causality between the model, between the items. If somebody of my family got a cancer, I don't know this cancer at all. Then I needed to search for that. And a personalized search for that cancer. And then get some treatment, get the useful information for my family members. The social media can do nothing at the moment. But in future, if we know that model is not intrusive for privacy, but that model can help you improve your life quality, why not? Yeah. So we are establishing that kind of entity, we call the cyber entity model, and then to generalize it, and then help this person in practice or in her or his life. Yeah. Technology can be graph model, graph embedding, and deep learning, of course.
No. Do we have any other questions from
One more question.
the audience?
We know that we predict some social media model using the GNN, just a graph neural network, and we know that there isn't a universal solution to construct a model like the CNN. It has a deep neural network, and the GNN is just not enough deeper, I guess. So there are some ways to solve this problem, just like randomly removing some edge from the graph. But there are some. Is there some ways to solve this problem more perfect, more perfect, or more better?
Definitely, I think this is not the time to talk about these levels of details. Yeah, but in general, yes, it is can be discussed in more details. But I prefer not to discuss it now, because the graph testing, and also you look at the deep learning, there are a number of inputs under the hidden layers, and also the connectivity between each layers.
Yeah.
And all of those parameters can be adjusted,
yeah.
And also feedback, feed forward, and also the number of samples you have, and also with or without source data or sample data, transfer learning, reinforced learning, all of those things can be applicable. And the graph learning is a very interesting topic, and we definitely have a lot to talk about. There is a UQAI machine learning interest group for students led by Marcos Gallagher. And weekly activities, you can go there asking same questions. We will definitely discuss it with you.
Thank you.
Fantastic. I think we just have time for one last question, then we'll round it up. And I might just start, I have kind of a doozy in here from Alan. I think we'll go with that as a closer. It's a little speculative, but Alan would like to know what will be the impact of the metaverse on all of this? So AI, social prediction, as we move into perhaps more dependence in this sphere, and
Short answer or long answer?
short answer.
Okay, I think social media is part of our life now, and we will not get rid of it. and we can only live with the social media and the social networks. But also I understand the human behavior has been changed because of the social media. And so whatever in the technological side in my profession, I do my best to stop the disasters happening on the social media if I'm doing that. And I know there are some big disasters could be triggered by social media and some bad platform or bad companies triggered that, whatever. But we needed to watch out for this technology because technology is out of control at the moment, I believe.
I'm slightly idiosyncratic view maybe about the metaverse. Like there's a lot of this kind of conversation about, you know, will the metaverse even happen? Is Zuckerberg, you know, just some megalomaniac madman who thinks he's building the metaverse and it can never be built? And you know, like I sometimes kind of listen to what Zuckerberg and other Silicon Valley characters say about the metaverse. And I'm like, I think we're already there. Like, you know, aside from the fact that we're not like yet wearing the goggles, but just the idea that our realities are now augmented in all sorts of ways by AI, which is the basic principle of the metaverse. That's kind of where we're at. And I think if you look at the social media cultures, particularly of the next generation of users, the extent to which augmented reality lenses and filters are kind of baked in, like almost like the most ordinary and important part of using TikTok or Instagram stories or Snapchat or whatever, then that kind of is the metaverse already. You know, it already is this kind of indistinguishable layering together of the real and the artificially generated, and kind of inhabiting a world that's always kind of those two things stitched together. So I feel like we've kind of already entered that moment in many ways, and it's about us kind of coming to terms with what it means to live in a reality like that that's kind of partly real and partly simulated.
Just I forgot adding on one. Actually, our school have a team to do this for Olympics 2032, and they're led by Professor Ranko, and we call it the mega event, and which we use metaverse to regenerate the Olympics all over the internet. Yeah, and it's CRC and all the government community with this very interested professors and the team are joining now.
Wow, that's really
It
interesting.
is on the news on the YouTube website as well. If you search for mega events.
Okay.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, my previous talk is negative, but that's what it's supposed to.
So I think that'll bring us to the close of this afternoon and this event. Fantastic discussion, and I really learned a lot myself. I really want to take the time to thank you both, Nick and Xue, for lending your expertise to our event. I know that everyone really appreciated having their questions answered. Stay tuned for our follow-up email with updated AI events, and if everybody could just please join me thanking Xue and Nick.
Thank you.
Now, if you guys maybe would like to stick around for a slice of